report to President Johnson, FBI Director Hoover, and it wasn't until the next morning when they did something they should have done the night before they started the autopsy to have seen to it that the surgeon, a couple of the surgeons from Parkland, should have been brought up and described to them, the pathologists, what they had seen and done before any dissection was done. They did not do that. They called on Saturday morning. This was now Saturday, November 23rd, the day after the shooting, and they learned that they had missed a bullet hole in the front of the president's neck. Because what they were seeing was a wound that had been expanded upon. When the brain is damaged, the brain is the boss. The brain is in control. Gentlemen, don't let the ladies con you into all that Valentine bullshit. Candy and flowers. The heart is nothing but a pump. So the brain is the boss. So when the brain can't function, take out carbon dioxide, put in oxygen, control cardiac and respiratory activity, you try to take over the brain's activities. And so they saw, in examining the wound in the neck, that the wound had gone right through the trachea. They had the built-in tracheostomy, built in. But the hole was too small to attach the cuff from the respirator machine. So they expanded upon it. Not deceitfully, not malevolently, obscuring for the most part the fact that there was a bullet hole there. A good, competent forensic pathologist would have picked that up at the autopsy, but these two guys, Humes and Boswell, never occurred to them, and they missed completely. So now they're confronted with a bullet hole that they missed, and now they got to reconstruct the whole thing. Now, as they're reconstructing, things begin to fall into place. They get the alleged murder weapon. This was a Mannlicher Carcano, a bolt-action carbine weapon, considered by every long gun expert I've ever spoken to as the most inferior weapon of his genre developed anywhere in the world. You know, I used to do medical legal seminars internationally, and the first one I ever did was in 1965 in Italy at the Institute of Legal Medicine.
And this was an Italian gun.
65, and we went very well. And I maintained correspondence with them in 1972, 73, when I was speaking out on the Warren Commission report and their adjudication that Oswald was a sole assassin. They invited me to come back to Italy to give a talk on the assassination. And I went back there and I gave my talk, kind of like I'm doing now, and so on. And then we saw some of the professors in the background were snickering. And I felt so bad had I pronounced, a couple of the multi-syllabic Italian names wrong, had I said something, and so I went to Silvio Merli, who is now the new director and who spoke good English, and I said, Silvio, afterwards, what did I do? What did I say? I apologize. I'm embarrassed. He said, no. It's nothing that you have to be embarrassed about. When you talked about the Mannlicher Carcano in Italy, that weapon is referred to as an instrument of love, not a weapon of war. That's what they think about the Mannlicher Carcano, where that weapon was developed. So they got the most skilled marksman they could find, John, to shoot. How long did it take to shoot, unload, reload, without allowing time for re-aiming, repositioning, and a moving target, which Kennedy's motorcade was? And it was determined that it took 2.3 seconds from shot to shot. Okay? And so what? And then they were confronted by an unexpected problem indeed. Abraham Zapruder, a women's clothing merchant in Dallas, bought a Bell Howe camera that day, and he went to Dealey Plaza to take pictures. And as he stood there on the parapet coming out from this person. His secretary bracing his leg, and the cars were coming down Elm Street. He started his footage, and that came to be the most important piece of evidence of all, the most important visual evidence depicting what had transpired. You will remember, people over 40, the cameras that were used in high school and college when our teachers wanted to show us a film. You got the camera, you opened up the side, it's on hinges, and then you took this spool of film on in a metal container, and you fitted it into these metal prongs, and then it moves in serpentine fashion, right? And that's what makes a film. The film is made up of individual frames, each frame. So here you got this 8mm frame, 8 millimeters. That's 1/3 of an inch. And they blew it up. And I had the opportunity to study that myself at Life magazine headquarters in December of 1965 in New York City. Life magazine having bought that film from the Zapruder family for a considerable amount of money. And by studying the shooting, it was determined, and there's no question, no argument about that, that Conley is struck 1.5 seconds after Kennedy is hit the first time in the throat. How can that be? How can that be? 1.5 seconds when we've seen that it takes the best marksman 2.3 seconds. And that is what gave birth of necessity to the single bullet theory. The single bullet theory emerged from the deliberations of the Warren Commission, and most specifically attributed to Arlen Specter, who was then junior legal counsel, to go on to become a U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. The single bullet theory they came up with was this, that a shot went into Kennedy's back, proceeded upward 11.5 degrees, that's to begin with. Proceeding upward, John, look, there's Oswald right there. He's shooting. There's the shot coming down, from back to front, from right to left.
Yeah, he's got the shitty Italian gun, I can see him.
Okay, so the bullet goes into the back, and it moves upward 11.5 degrees.
Did you want it, is this the point for the demonstration? Should I get the chairs?
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
Okay.
The simulation that will not include actual gunfire.
Okay, John, we need a man for governor and a woman for president. We have them, huh? Okay.
Thank you, President Kennedy, Governor Conway.
Here we are, Madam President. So how do we explain the bullet going in here and exiting here? Well, they said, what if the president were bent over? You forgot to tie your shoelace, Mr. President. or were you scratching your groin? So the bullet comes out, moving forward and leftward, it would miss Governor Conley completely, but in midair, it turns 18, 20 inches, goes over here to the right, hits him in the right posterior axillary area, which means behind the right armpit, goes through his chest, pierces the right lung, breaks the right fifth rib, destroying 4 inches of that bone, exits from beneath the nipple level. That's why you see the president always has to be a woman and the governor. until Sophia Loren comes around.
Which she's been trying to make happen for years, but so far nothing.
The bullet then moving downward below nipple level. Governor, hold your Stetson hat up. Look, the crowd loves you. Look, right over there, wave. Look over there and wave. Okay? There's, you're holding the Stetson. The bullet comes out, moving downward. The bullet comes back upward and around, hits him behind the right wrist, breaks the right radius, one of two long bones from the elbow to the wrist, exits from the front of the wrist and goes into the left thigh, and not seen for a while or known about at all. Now remember, John Conley, 6'4", big bone Texan. So you're talking about destroying 4 inches of the right fifth rib and a common unit fraction of the radius, which broadens down here before it meets the eight small bones of the wrist and emerges and proceeds downward. That is the single bullet theory, without which you cannot have a soul assassin. It is, I'll remind you about your high school Latin, the sine qua non, something without which something else cannot exist. Got that? You like that? That's the single bullet theory. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Kennedy and Governor Conley.
Now, that's the trajectory of the hero of the single bullet theory, Commission Exhibit 399. This is a bullet that is found quite inadvertently. A maintenance man, Darrell Tomlinson by name, at the Harks Hospital, trying to get to the men's room after the presidential entourage had left, finding the corridor blocked by the emergency room, bends down to move the stretcher, and when he does that, lo and behold, there's a bullet. Nobody had seen this bullet before. Somehow it got there beneath the stretcher. A copper-jacketed lead core piece of ammunition, 1.25 inches in length, 1/4 inch in diameter, 6.5 millimeters. And that is the hero of the single bullet theory. The bullet is completely intact, only slight deformity at the base from the impact of the firing mechanism. Otherwise, completely intact, despite having done all of that damage to those big bones in Conley. That's the condition of the bullet, and the trajectory I've always shown you, and the weight of the bullet. In its pristine state, it weighs 161 grains. As found, the bullet weighed 158.6 grains. 2.4 grains is exactly 1.5% of the original weight. And the bullet left fragments of itself in 4 anatomic locations. We know that. And I spoke with the head OR nurse, Audrey Bell by name, and she told me how the surgeons had taken the pieces of bullet out, given it to her to be passed on to the FBI agents and so on. And yet we're told that all these fragments, some of which Kennedy took to the grave with him, that they only weighed 1.5% of the original weight. Impossible. So that is a single bullet theory, and once you destroy that, then you show that there were 2 shooters. Getting into who did the shooting, was Oswald a shooter? This goes into great depth on a lot of other matters. I won't get into a lot of those right now, except the whole business about Oswald is pure nonsense. Lee Harvey Oswald had been in the Marines stationed at Sugi Air Force Base in Japan. He applied for a hardship, saying that his mother needed him. His mother had missed work one day, a bruised nose, supposedly. He came home, and in a couple of days, he's taking off for Russia. Where's the money come from? Goes to Russia, seeks asylum in citizenship, and the Russians, they weren't born yesterday. They turned him down, and he marries the niece of a KGB. KGB was, top level Secret Service, powerful agency. He marries the niece of a KGB colonel, and yet when he comes time, he wants to come home, then he goes to the embassy and they give him money to come home. Just give him money to come home with his bride, Maureen Oswald, whom I came to know and have talked with and met with a couple of times down there in Dallas. Very nice woman. Then, for some reason or other, contrary to what people who knew him and his mother said, he didn't have any bad feelings about Kennedy. In fact, he was an admirer of Kennedy. But they said that he just decided one day that he was going to kill Kennedy.
And at the end of the day, you believe there was a conspiracy among current and former members of the CIA and maybe some in the military to have Kennedy assassinated.
The situation in Washington at the White House was very bad with the CIA and the military people. The CIA, John, was an entity by itself. They did whatever the hell they wanted to. They had their own airplanes, their own people, their own staff, everything. They were independent of government. Finally, with the Bay of Pigs debacle in Cuba, Kennedy said, that's enough. And he's going to destroy the CIA, took a piece of paper, tore it up, that's okay. Made many pieces, threw it into the air. He was there with a U.S. Senator, Mike Mansfield from Montana, and said, this is what I intend to do to the CIA. The military, they were being disrespectful even in his presence, and out of his presence, they were insulting him and everything. They just completely disrespectful. It was a horrible situation. And it was a confrontation, and there's no way that the military and the CIA could prevail. And they knew that they could never beat them at the polls. So there's only one way to eliminate this confrontation, get America back on track. They were unhappy with Kennedy deciding to try to pull out of Vietnam, warm up the Cold War with Russia. There was no way to do it except to eliminate Kennedy, and they made a decision, I think, probably 4 or 5 people together at the most, active or recently retired CIA military, that he had to go. And they set up the assassination. There's no way in the world that all these things could have taken place with Oswald, all the things that were covered up, the mishandling of evidence and so on. So that's the way it was done, and that is why it was done. That's why it remains covered up to this day. They keep talking about they were supposed to, within 70, they're supposed to release all the records. Every time there's a deadline, they say, well, we're holding back stuff because it would compromise the safety and welfare of America if we were to release everything. Compromise the safety and welfare. If Lee Harvey Oswald, this non-entity, was responsible from beginning to end, and that is the way the Warren Commission plays it out. There are no ands, ifs, maybes, buts, howevers, moreovers. You go with the Warren Commission, you go with Oswald as the sole assassin from beginning to end. From beginning to end. And then they did have a codicil in there that after 5 years following the release of the Warren Commission report, a quote recognized expert in the field of pathology with a serious historic purpose could apply to get into the National Archives where the materials were and review them. And
all the leftover items from the assassination itself.
So at that time in 1971, I was president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the largest, most prestigious group of forensic scientists in the world. I was president of the American College of Legal Medicine. I was coroner of Allegheny County, so I applied to Burke Marshall. Burke Marshall had been a deputy attorney general when the agreement had been made, and at that time then, 5 years later, he was a professor of law at Yale University. So I wrote to him and never got a response. I wrote a second time, never got a response. Finally, one day, I got a phone call, a guy, and he identified himself as a writer with the New York Times. And he said that he had heard that I was trying to get permission to examine these materials, and I said yes. And he said, well, he was going to look into it. And they called me back in a few weeks, and I told him that I hadn't heard anything, and he asked me, he said, do you mind, he asked me if he would contact Burt Marshall. He said sometimes people responded to the New York Times. And I said, by all means. And so sure enough, toward Christmas time, I did get a letter finally from Burt Marshall telling me that he was going on Christmas vacation, but when he returned, he would contact me. And finally I heard from him in January, and he dragged me around for another few months, and then finally I got permission. But not before he said that I had to go to New Haven to meet with him again. Nothing like that ever said. He figured that would turn me off. Little did he know that New Haven, my second home. My relatives and my closest friends were there in New Haven from my early teenage years. Linder's Bagels, Murray Linder is my dearest friend, now deceased. And so I went, and I finally got in, and so I'm there examining stuff, John, and I'm holding the document which listed what was contained in all of that stuff, and then a year and a half later, an inventory was done, and I'm looking, and I'm seeing that a large metal box, which contained the brain, was gone.
The brain was missing.
April of '66 to October of '67 or '65, '66, and it was gone. Some X-rays, some pictures were gone, and they remain unaccounted for to this day.
And you could have learned more about the assassination,
Of course.
how the bullets struck, how many there were, et cetera, had
Yeah.
you been able to examine the brain
Isn't that
years later.
interesting? You know, these things are just like that missing, okay? So Oswald did all of that, right? So that's the story, and how it was covered up then and continues to be covered up now. How in the world release of information would compromise our national security and welfare is beyond me.
Many people are aware of all the controversy surrounding the JFK case because of people like you who've been studying it and reporting on it so long. But not everybody knows that Bobby Kennedy's assassination was not a clear-cut